voters' views on disabilities and obesity, as we heard there in Melbourne this morning. Now, the Prime Minister used prosperity from the mining boom to fund programs to boost workplace participation.
And of course, she was speaking last night at the Sydney Institute that many people on disability and other pensions should be working. Greens MP Adam Bandt joins us in the studio now. And Adam, should people get off welfare and get back to work?
Well, look, I think that we're running at what economists are calling close to full employment, and the unemployment rate's at 4.9%. And as the Australian Council of Social Services reminded us this morning, people who are currently on the dole have to apply for about 10 jobs a fortnight, and if they don't take a suitable job, they get kicked off. I'm not convinced that there's this massive pool of hundreds of thousands or millions of Australians out there who are dole bludging. I think it's a political argument and a political distraction, not an economic one. And I think it's, let's go back and look at why we're in a deficit at the moment. We're in a deficit because the government, rightly and with the Greens' support, helped Australia out when we were facing the worst of the global financial crisis. What they're doing around the rest of the world is saying to the companies and to the banks that they helped out during that financial crisis, well, we're going to come back to you now to ask for some support now that things are better. And instead, I think the government, instead of looking at areas where we might ask the people who we helped out to contribute, she's now having a go at everyday Australians, and I don't think that's the right approach.
So do you see this as both sides attempting to outmuscle each other on welfare reform?
Well, look, I'm disappointed that the government seems to be rushing to embrace a pretty conservative and uncompassionate agenda on welfare reform. And I think that when you talk to the people who are involved in the sector, you will find in Australia there are many, many people who want to work, who are facing barriers to it. The proportion of people who are getting unemployment benefits who really genuinely don't want to work is pretty low. And I don't think the case has been made out that we need really punitive measures against them, when in fact, let's look at other areas of the budget where money could be saved. We're currently giving $5 billion a year to the mining industry so that they can buy diesel fuel cheaper. Now, this is economically ridiculous, it's environmentally ridiculous. Why aren't we looking at areas like that? Or postponing the proposed company tax cuts that are going to cost the budget somewhere in the order of $2.4 billion next year, or revisiting the original mining tax proposal. I just don't think that this is the right approach, to pick a vulnerable section of the community and to use them as a whipping boy.
We have seen disability programs, though, getting people into work. I think Qantas runs a number of these types of programs that, in fact, are very beneficial and supportive, and the people themselves have gained a lot from doing that. So the government must have a snapshot of the people that they are wanting to target and run specific programs to perhaps make this work.
Look, I've got no problems whatsoever with government programs saying, look, people have got to take up a proper training place or move into employment. And I think that's for 99% of the people who are out of work. You will find that if they're looking for work, they genuinely want it. What my experience is that over the decade or so of the Howard government, we turned a good something that was good in terms of Centrelink into now a mishmash of privatised job providers. Government gets involved in some places, and my experience from talking to people who are administering these programs is that they're saying there's not enough money in the system to actually pay individualised attention to people with particular needs and get them into work. I mean,
it's not the sort of work that we need. So it's in the mines, in the country, rebuilding.
Well, look, I think meaningful work. I mean, my electorate of Melbourne has got the highest number of people who live in Housing Commission flats of anywhere, and the highest number of people who've come here from overseas, born overseas in the last 5 years. And I speak every day to people who've come here on refugee or humanitarian visas who are looking for work, especially from places like Africa. They're looking for work, they're looking to start up their own business, and they're finding because they don't have a lending history they can't borrow to start up their own business. They're looking for employment and they're not getting their qualifications recognised. I think to say to these people, we're now going to beat you with a bigger stick, is the wrong approach.
On the carbon tax, the Climate Change Minister Greg Combet at the Press Club yesterday seemed to like a lot the figure of a $20 per tonne figure for the carbon price, which is at the low end of that target range. Will the Greens wear a figure so low?
Well, that's obviously still going to be discussed. I think the Minister made the point that that hasn't been through the Climate Change Committee yet. I know that Ross Garnaut is talking about a figure of $20 to $30. I know we know from the Treasury modelling that they modelled a figure up to $40, and we've heard other people say that you'd need a figure in the order of $70 if you wanted to move quickly to a renewable energy economy. So we'll be discussing all of those.
Will $20 though be enough of an incentive for companies to move to a green future?
Well, that's the test that will apply. The test that will apply to the package is this going to begin the transformation in the Australian economy to a low emissions future, a low pollution future? And we've got to look at the price. We've got to look at where the revenue that's raised goes. I mean, Ross Garnaut, for example, has suggested that about $11 billion might be raised from a carbon price like that, and he suggested that between $2 and $3 billion should go into research and development to ensure that Australia wins the clean energy race and isn't left behind by China and other places.
But the pressure on the federal government, because of the way Tony Abbott is responding to this, in using it as a scare campaign, almost as a big tax, is okay. 50% is going to go back to households. Joe Hockey's point yesterday was simply that this is a redistribution of wealth rather than a genuine attempt to deal with carbon.
Well, the point of a price on pollution is to make polluting industries, to bring about a change so that we shift from polluting industries to clean energy, and putting a price on pollution will start to do that. So if you're an investor and you're looking to decide, well, I want to build a new power plant in Australia, which way am I going to go? Putting a price, making the polluters pay for putting pollution into the atmosphere makes them more likely to choose a clean energy option. Now, some of that revenue should be used to compensate those low-income earners who are going to be potentially affected if the price is passed down. But the point is to change that behaviour at the industry level.
The government is also giving clear signals that petrol will be excluded from any carbon tax. The Greens have expressed serious reservations about that. Again, would you weigh petrol not being in part of the scheme?
Well, the government can bring that to the Multi-Party Climate Change Committee, and we'll discuss it confidentially there as in good faith as we have so far. I mean, we've expressed a pretty clear position about that, and I mean the amount of money that's raised from the scheme is not a limitless pie. It's a fixed amount. The scheme's going to be revenue neutral, and we want to see, as I've said, money go into research and development, money to go into rural Australia to allow for some for them to engage in projects that will result in significant abatement.
How are you finding the consultation process? We're hearing no shortage of complaints from senior resource and steel company executives basically saying they've been shut out, or the government's got a predetermined position and no consultations are being entered into. What is the Greens' experience as part of the formulation of this?
Well, look, the establishment of the committee was something that we proposed, and we wanted to have a forum where there would be parliamentarians informed by independent experts from science and economics and other fields who would be able to have some good and frank discussions around a table about to try and, I mean, we know that there's differences of opinion between us and Labor, but let's see if we can find the areas of commonality. And so far we've participated in that process, and I think it's a process that the government's continuing to participate in good faith.
Adam Bandt, just a final comment on you, just this Defence Force imbroglio that has been going on. Stephen Smith obviously under a lot of pressure. What would you be very supportive of the moves he's taken?
Well, look, I am supportive of the moves he's taken. I think that there are potentially sections of Australian society that and workforces that think that they don't have to comply with 21st century standards of behaviour, and anything that the government does to make the message clear that, especially on treating women in the workplace, is something that they take seriously, we're supportive of.
Adam Bandt, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the United Nations